motion, transportation master plan. So I just wanted to give you a quick overview of some of the key issues. What is the project? It is a it's actually a review and an update of your 2007 plan, transportation master plan, and it will be an implementation tool for your official plan process. It'll allow you to justify future transportation investments, and it'll also satisfy the first two phases of the Class Municipal Assessment Act. So as we carry out through that, there's a requirement to do public engagement. Of course, we're going to go beyond the mandatory requirements and encourage a lot more public engagement throughout the study. And I think that's what Steve's going to talk to a little later. The objectives of the master plan are to look at the policies and targets of your previous master plan, see if they had been successful, and to see what had worked and what had not worked throughout the few years that's passed since that time. The policies and plans that we put in place will be helping be based on the emerging demographic trends and changing economic status of your city. And of course, we want to make sure that we encourage the economic development of the city as we go through this. And that's a key consideration, as you can imagine. The impacts, of course, of not doing this are significant. You will be carrying on decisions based on old data and old information. And so we'll be updating all of that, providing you with new information for you to do all of your capital investments, infrastructure planning, etc., and looking at your official plan updates. Our city, our team, there's a lot of city staff participating in the study. We've had kickoff meetings and a few meetings, and there's quite a few attendees at those meetings. Our consultant team, we have planners. It's led by Cole Engineering, which is the firm that I represent. We have planning firm associated with us to help us with the planning aspects and the public engagement components. And we have a goods movement specialist in David Krieger to help us with planning goods movement activities and freight activities, because that's a critical aspect of the study, as well as McPhail Transportation Engineering, which, if you know, Rod McPhail was the Director of Transportation at the City of Toronto until recently and is a great advisor to our team. Stakeholders, we have a long list of stakeholders that we plan on engaging, in industry specialists, special interest groups, and the community at large to make sure we grab their input into the study. Maybe, Steve, some of the special interest groups would be...
We'll ask the question. You can go forward, please, and then we'll ask the questions at the end.
Fair enough. So that's our study team. The study schedule, we were brought on board in November, so we had the Christmas breaks. We're actually in the process of developing our review of the policies and targets that you've had in the past. We've been received your model so we can start rebuilding your transportation model to emulate the city infrastructure. And we're commissioning our public engagement starting next month, and Steve will be talking about that in a minute on the boards here. So we hope to go through that first phase by the end of April, carrying on to the more detailed reviews of the policies and the activities we need to address during the Transportation Master Plan, and going out to the public again before the summer break. The idea being that in the fall, we can then assemble all of our material, go back out to the public for the final version, and then wrap up our final report and bring it back to you in about a year's time. So it's a very optimistic schedule, but we think it's doable as a review and an update. So talking about the transportation policies that we'll get into initially, These are some of the areas that we'll look at as we get going and use the stakeholder involvement to drive a lot of this. And the goals are the quality of life, road network considerations, complete street policies, one-way street conversions, transportation demand management, and primarily we want to make sure whatever we put in place is supportive of your economic development initiatives. So talking a little bit about those policies, improve quality of life, and we heard a lot about that this morning about what your improved quality of life is considering and where you want to go with it. Of course, there was a long discussion today about prioritizing pedestrian activities, cycling activities, and things like that. So that'll be brought into this in a meaningful way. Cyclists, transit users, and of course automobile drivers as well. What does that mean from a transportation perspective in terms of interpreting that into your healthy communities kind of setting? Another policy that we'll be looking at is your road network considerations. Of course, we want to maximize the use of the infrastructure. Certainly we heard this morning as well that roads were also important to you to maintain and keep going. So we want to make sure that we use the infrastructure the best way in the right classification for the right areas. A balanced network of users for all users, and a balance between the downtown area and the upper mountain area, which makes sure that they get equal treatment at those. Of course, safety and accessibility are always key considerations in anything we do. Complete streets policies. We do want to look at that. We understand you don't have a complete streets policy as such, but you do have a hierarchy of travel, and we will be following that. As we've seen here, pedestrians, cyclists, transit, automobiles, and freights and goods are all going to get consideration. And of course, we want to use the right-of-way in the best way possible. Travel lanes, curb lanes with streetscaping where possible, making the city more livable. Of course, our planning firms will be helping us with that. Pedestrian zones and routine accommodation, which I understand is a local kind of terminology, where as you rebuild certain parts or maintain certain parts of your road network, you'll be adding some of these features in as part of your improvement plans. I know one-way streets have been a key part of Hamilton's operations for road network operations for a very long time. So we want to look at that from a policy perspective and make sure that we've done all the considerations for all of the things that would go into converting a one-way street to a two-way operation. And I know there's lots of them out there for you to consider. And then making sure that we entrench into that process and that policy, that there's an engagement process with not just the vocal few, but the impacted businesses and stakeholders that might be affected by any conversion that we might take on. Transportation demand management, of course, is always critical. So a policy for that will be put in place. And that includes things like parking policies, improved transit policies, expanding cycle lanes and sidewalks, subsidized travel programs, all of this to encourage more mode choices as you move forward in smart commute activities. So as we go through the development of those policies and we start looking at the targets that we put in place for those, we wanted to actually say, what are the key targets that we would want to achieve as we go through the implementation of some of these policies and plans. So we'll be developing KPIs as we go through for targets. And some of them are examples here. As you can see, transit rides per capita is an example of some of the criteria that we might use to evaluate whether we've achieved our goals, and increased walking and cycling activities as well. From a capital budgeting perspective, the Transportation Master Plan will help in a big way with identifying that. We will, as part of the modeling exercise, we'll be running a number of scenarios and developing sort of a priority plan for infrastructure investments. for you at the end of the project, and so that will be based on benefit costs and risk assessments that we build into this study as part of the criteria as we move forward with the prioritization of your capital programs. We talked a little bit about goods movement and the impact it has on the economy. The goods movement in Hamilton has been a major issue, a major part of your economic growth and economic sustainability. And we've talked to some of them, and we understand that there's a few criteria that they're looking for that we're going to try and entrench into their routes and their programs: direct connectivity to major roadways, reliability in the system so they know when they leave them that they can get to places, redundancy if there is a problem, and consistency in terms of the application of regulations and laws. And finally, one of the areas that is critical to Hamilton as you're growing is interregional transportation, and with the new James Street station coming in, you're going to have more GO activity here. You know, the extension of GO to Stony Creek eventually and other locations. It's going to be a big help to actually ensuring the growth of the city, and we might want to make sure that the road networks and the transportation system we put in place is supportive of that success criteria. Same thing with MTO corridors and other provincial initiatives like the NGTA. So with that, the next steps for this study is to take any comments we have from this presentation that you might have and any questions you might have, and make sure we address those as we carry on through the study. We're looking at the policies, and we will be engaging the public. And I don't know, Steve, if this is an appropriate time to talk about what you've got planned for the board.
Thanks, John. So basically what this board represents is 5-kilometer radius catchment areas of locations that we've identified for our first, second, and third stages of our mandatory public meetings. This is not the only meetings that we're going to have. This is really a fluid conversation throughout the study process. There's lots of opportunities for engagement. We'd like to touch every part of the city, the rural areas, the urban areas, make sure that there's a lot of diverse issues. We want to make sure that we listen to what these issues are and we address them as best as we can throughout this process. Our first 4 dates for the first stage of the public consultation will be March 23rd through March 26th. I think the first one is at the downtown at the Art Gallery. The second one, I believe it's the Shadok Presbyterian Church on Mohawk Road West. The third, I believe it's in Stony Creek at the Battlefield House and Museum, and the last one was in Upper Ottawa Street at the Emmanuel Church, United Church there. So those are our first 4 locations. It's a pretty good cross section for the first round of meetings. The second, we'd like to have them in probably late June, and then depending on the timeline on the schedule, the end of November will be our final round of public consultation for our mandatory meetings. And that's not to say, again, we're going to do a lot of extensive public engagement. If there's events that are going on in your ward, we can be there as part of raising awareness and being part of that event and sharing our information and getting information back from the public at different stages of the study. So I want to leave that as an open invitation of things that may be going on in your areas that you would like us to attend and be there. We're more than willing to attend these events and be part of the conversation and engagement. Thank you.
Thank you. That's the end of the...
Yes, sorry, that's the end. Thank you.
No problem.
For that.
We have some people like to ask some questions. Councillor Whitehead, Farr, Collins, Mayor Eisenberger, and Councillor Johnson. So, Councillor Whitehead.
Thank you for the presentation. I've been looking forward to getting on the move on the master transportation study. However, it concerns me that the consultant comes in and 2/3 of the population is located outside the downtown corridor, the Lower City corridor, and yet majority of your consultation to start with is in the Lower City. Can you explain that?
It wasn't done on purpose to exclude anybody. We're trying to, as the map demonstrates, trying to get everywhere in the city as much as possible. If, like I said, we're more than willing to be at any part of the city at any time. These are just the mandatory meetings that we're trying to hold. Some venues are available at different times, and we're trying to manage the logistics of having meetings at different locations. And there are 2 mountain locations for the first round of public engagement, and there's 2 lower city locations for the first round of public engagement.
I think you talk about the mandatory, not the pre.
These are the mandatory meetings at different stages.
The first 4 you showed me were in the March, and that was in the West Hill area, it was in the downtown area, it was in the Stony Creek area, and one in Upper Ottawa.
And one in Upper Ottawa, one on Mohawk Road West.
That's Lower City.
That's Magnolia and Mohawk Road. Shadoke Church.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I stand corrected.
And then the Stony Creek at the Battlefield Park Museum and House.
So I think the emphasis here is I truly believe that the Master Transportation Study is really about inclusion. And that means everybody, whether you live in Binbrook or in Waterdown, it really is about inclusion. And if you make it more difficult for people to access the consultation for their outlying areas, then you may not get the input and still get that alienation. And I really, I think it's time that we build those bridges and make sure we don't have the alienation by giving every opportunity for those to participate and provide input in this significant plan. So those are my first comments on the consultation. Please do whatever you can to ensure that every reach of this community has an opportunity to be engaged without traveling miles to get there. Second thing, I don't see anything in the presentation on the functionality of our accesses. You talked about transportation, you talked about everything else, but Hamilton has a unique situation that doesn't exist in 90% or 99% of the municipalities that you've dealt with or across this country. We have something that's very unique, and that is that we only have 5 accesses between the mountain and the lower city, and they have a function. So in this master transportation study, what function and scope are we going to embark on, or you're going to embark on, to understand whether it's meeting the current needs and the future needs of this community?
Well, clearly, we're aware of the access routes and the importance of them. Some of them have been looked at as to what are they function, how many do you need, and part of the exercise that we're going to be going through is actually a modeling exercise. So we'll be taking a look at if we took a certain access out, or if we used it in a different way, what would that mean to other accesses? So the whole exercise of iterative testing and going out to the public and asking them, the stakeholders, and I think this was only meant to be the first round that we're starting out to engage the public. The whole intent is we want to engage everybody that's involved, and those accesses are going to be looked at as part of the whole system, including pedestrians, cyclists, transit, etc., goods movement. So
absolutely. I mean, my biggest concern is that 2/3 of the population are bottlenecked through these limited accesses to government and the lower city period. And I want to ensure that we can appreciate that limitation and build into your scope and plan into the future, because we still look for significant growth on the mountain. How those are going to be accommodated on the very limited accesses that we have now.
And I think that also applies to the businesses up there as well, not just the residents up there. How do we make sure they're successful as well?
Appreciate it. The next question I have is the Rapid Ready. You did touch a little bit in regards to one of the stakeholders, but there are components within the Rapid Ready plan that may suggest, for example, bus lanes taking lanes out. You will incorporate any of those suggestions and locations, or identify locations where it would be strategic in this process?
Absolutely. We'll be looking at your, like we said at the start, this is a review and an update. So you have a lot of existing documents like the Rapid Ready document that we're going to build upon. So we're going to look into those and take those scenarios and test them and see what if scenarios. and see if there's improvements needed, if there's widenings needed, if there's bypasses needed, whatever it is, queue lane jumping, et cetera, we're going to be looking at all this.
Well, the reason I'm mentioning it to you is because I don't like doing things ad hoc. I really truly believe this is the blueprint. So between the Rapid Ready and the Master Transportation Study, you're now dealing with your public transit, movement of goods, movement of people, and all the other optional alternative modes of transportation. So I really see this as the holy grail of transportation in this community, and I want to make sure we get it right. And the Rapid Ready will interface with what you're doing, and there's opportunities there that you need to measure through modeling to identify optimum locations for bus lanes, which was a big debate that we just went through. So hopefully that is incorporated into this process. And I see you shaking the head.
Absolutely.
Great.
Yes. Yeah.
Prioritization. Oh, okay. So you talk about prioritization, and I'm a bit fuzzy on how that would be done. For example, we have areas of the city that have significant problems and issues on the transportation, whether it's the parking lot, Gar Street, Rymel Road, Upper James, West Smith, Garth. I mean, those is unlimited in regards to the jams that are happening on the mountain. And when I look at conversions, which are important to some degree in regards to the complete streets and that, and I'll give you that. But when you start prioritizing, how would you prioritize those issues?
Well, there's going to be two criteria primarily. It's going to be first the technical evaluation that we do using the model and saying, when do things start breaking down? When do they sort of pop up in the network as being, stressed? And what would we do to de-stress them, whether that's moving traffic or doing something somewhere else? That the model will say that if we build that over there, they'll go over there, and then we can do something with that street. So there's a whole technical exercise with that modeling. But the other side of that is also what the economic requirements are and the residents' requirements are in terms of the social and environmental needs that I think you talked earlier about as the three pillars of your 2020 document from before. So it'll start with the technical evaluation and then be admitted by the other criteria.
So currently we have a situation where people are moving under a traffic lens pretty efficiently. And from a safety lens, according to our safety statistics, pretty safely. But we also have areas in the city that traffic isn't moving at all, or there's huge problems of movement of goods and transportation. So there's a want over here in regards to complete streets, which is a great and admirable thing to have. But there's a fundamental need over here in regards to movement of goods and people and transportation. So I try to understand how you think this process through in regards to making those priorities.
So just to reiterate, we don't have any preconceived outcomes of what's going to happen. This is part of the engagement process as well. We try to provide a balanced transportation network. There's always going to be some challenges to overcome, and at those key decision points, what we are providing is a framework to help make those decisions on a case-by-case basis. And what the model will do is identify problem areas that we need to focus attention on and to refine our metrics of what's really important along certain corridors in recognition that we want to have a healthy environment and healthy communities and complete communities, and what's the best balance between all these issues to achieve a result that may not be the perfect result, the ideal result, but if people can buy into the process and how we achieve that result, I think that's the success of what this plan can provide. So it's really trying to reach consensus on our decision-making process, making sure that we look at all the aspects that go into decision-making. And hopefully this plan is a framework that provides us to make those decisions at the end of the day. So we don't have any. It's still a refinement period. This is part of the planning process, is to identify certain metrics, but really refine the framework so everybody has consensus that we may not agree with that decision at the end of the day, but we agree how you got to that decision, because that was the best decision that we could make in that situation. So I think that's really what the plan is trying to do, is trying to think at a high level of what frameworks we can put in place to deal with those individual constrained areas.
See that matrix and how you arrive at making those priorities. right?
Yeah,
will
come out of the
people will be involved through consultation on that constraint, creating that matrix.
Absolutely. That's what the workshops are for. And I just want to say that not every corridor is applicable for all users. When we talk about a balanced network, it's balanced network, not necessarily a balanced corridor. If it's a goods corridor, you may not want to streetscape it the same way you would a residential street. Right?
Well, which brings the last question in, and that is, I always thought it important to have LRT on the mountain, feeding the GO station, which would become our Union Station, to the airport, the waterfront to the airport. The problem is that the corridors are very limited. There's an opportunity through this master transportation study, depending what comes out of it, to maybe move things around a little bit to provide that capacity. Is that correct?
Definitely, we are aware of the airport lands and the airport. The success criteria of getting a connection to downtown with that area. I've been involved with previous studies that looked at the corridors up and down there and how we could use them for LRT. Or a rapid bus or whatever it's going to be, and it's constrained. It's like all your other accesses, it's constrained. But the concept is, yes, the intent of this study will be trying to make connections to transit connections and transportation connections.
I should have said it a different way. I was hoping that with that as part of the framework, that when you are looking and designing the functions and moving based on what you observed, your best, what's the word, best practices, as well as listening from the stakeholders, you start moving or identifying roads a little differently and traffic a little differently, which might create a little greater capacity in that corridor that we so badly need from the north-south. Would that be part of this exercise?
Yeah, and it'll be primarily, again, based on probably a people-moving kind of exercise, if that becomes a transit priority and we want to move people, a group of people through that area, then maybe we find other routes for the cars and try and divert some of the cars to other accesses.
Great.
If I could also add, this is an update to our original 2007 Transportation Master Plan, so this provides a good check-in and validation of what we said originally. Lots of things have changed over the last 7 years. We want to see what has changed. Maybe some of those patterns have changed. So the original assumptions that we made, maybe we need to tweak them and revisit them. So that's the real purpose of the review and update is what we said 7 years ago still valid and applicable? What has changed and what do we need to adjust or modify to make sure that our system operates efficiently for all road users?
The reason I raise it is because West Fifth, for example, is 3 times over what was originally modeled. It was modeled for in regards to traffic loads. So because of the amount of development that's taking place, I don't even think that it matches up with the and where it took place matches up with what was contemplated in that original master transportation study that you referred to that's currently in place. So I look forward to this exercise. Thank you very much for coming forward.
Thank you, Councillor Whitehead. Councillor Farr.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, and thank you to our presenter, John, who we're clearly going to be working with for the next little while, and to Steve and the group who brought forward this wonderful poster on the easel that talks about how we'll engage Citywide, which is really important when we requested that we take the TMP to the next step. And I hope when we do go out, Steve, and talk to all the good citizens of Hamilton. In every corner, clearly, I think the radius is 5 kilometers with all those circles we see. You've got most of the city covered. You asked the question of what they think about a gondola. Terry and I have talked about it in the past, and I'd be really interested in an engagement exercise to hear people from across the city and their opinions on something like that, and other creative aspects to transportation instead of just sticking to the usual topics. That said, that's more of at this point, just a suggestion, not a question. So questions, I'll start with page 3. And the third bullet, the impact on economic development and business growth. And John, wondering if you could just expand on that bullet and how that translates with respect to the first couple of phases of this update. Through you.
Business improvement areas, we'll certainly be talking to all of those to say what their issues are, trying to find out from them what they need, what their problems are, parking issues, loading issues, all of those things are going to be worked in at a policy level. as well as I think the goods and the freight movement, for example, is a major part of your criteria. So, I mean, those are going to be the basics that we're going to build on in terms of engaging the business community, as well as making sure that we try and make a fair, like we said, a balanced network that not only deals with residential commuter traffic, but also the daily routine of other businesses that need it, and nighttime traffic as well.
Will we be providing examples of success stories as it relates to initiatives of the past 10 years as approved by previous councils on corridors where there has been an increase in and a boost in economic activity when we reframed how we were approaching the street in general, the designs? Areas of this city where we could use other areas as examples of economic impact success stories.
So as we review the policies, it's always good to look at what has worked for us and what hasn't. So we need to look at what our successes are, how can we build upon those, and what are the lessons learned on areas that have met challenges and didn't meet our expectations. The other opportunity through the study is to look at how are we evaluating these things, and John kind of alluded to the key performance indicators. What are our metrics? What are we using today, and do we need to rethink those and to come back and check in on what's been working and what has been successful from an economic development perspective in transportation?
Great. John, you said...
Sorry, and by the way, there is a study that looked at gondolas in Toronto, so we could refer to that.
Thank you. I was just trying to lighten things up, but it's crickets on that one. Thank you, John. On slide 10, please. I just want to try to understand this slide a little bit better. It's the complete street policy considerations. You got a hierarchy here of travel, of pedestrians, bicycles, transit, automobile, freight, and goods movement. I take it that just happens to be the...
Yes.
It's not a 1 through 5. Okay.
Right.
And then the road...
just a coverage of all the points at this point. Yeah.
Inevitably, after engagement, it may come out that way in terms of priorities, but we'll see what the public has to say. But you had also said, quote, in your presentation, you don't have a complete streets policy, end quote. And I was under the impression with our pedestrian mobility plan last term of council that we now do have a policy. So can I just get that cleared up? I might be wrong.
The pedestrian mobility plan is, I guess, 95% of a complete streets policy, but we won't outrightly call it a complete streets policy, but it definitely serves as the pedestrian element of a complete streets policy that and how we implement things on a routine basis on a project by project incrementally and not one-off projects that it's a complete streets. It's really an implementation tool. I guess the one difference in the pedestrian mobility plan is in most complete streets policies, there is an exclusion clause in case whatever happens that we don't do something. We didn't put that into the pedestrian mobility plan because we didn't want to get the pedestrian mobility plan confused with a complete streets policy versus a pedestrian mobility plan, which also looked to expand the pedestrian network as well. So really that plan focused on the quality of the pedestrian infrastructure that we put in that is very compatible with complete streets and is not entirely different, but is not specifically a complete streets policy.
Wow. You're getting good, Malloy, I'll tell you. Through you, Chair. I think I heard you say it's more of an implementation tool than a policy and more specifically related to pedestrians. That said, my understanding, though, is going forward when we redesign a street, we redesign it with the pedestrian mobility plan in mind. So is that correct through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor?
Through the Chair, that's correct.
Okay. And so how would that pedestrian mobility plan through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, fit into the conversation? And particularly, again, I'm focused on your first phase, which is the engagement.
And we'll be, through you to the councillor, they will be using that as a foundation to build upon in going out to the public saying what worked and what do they like, what they don't like about that, and embracing that policy in the transportation master plan and the go forward. So we make sure that a complete streets policy, even though it is not a separate document, will be embraced in the transportation master plan. So it's a consideration on go forward infrastructure activities. And it'll be based on what you've already got and what the public tells us is they like and don't like about that.
Yes, sorry, through the chair. Just to add, again, we have a truck route study, a cycling master plan, a pedestrian mobility plan, a lot of other plans. This transportation master plan looks at all of those things and tries to complicatedly combine them into one thing to kind of act as a review for everything. So it's not a small undertaking. There's a lot of work involved. It's very, very comprehensive. And if some specific recommendations come out to recommend that Plan X, Y, or Z may need to be updated, then that may be a potential outcome of this process.
Okay, good. I have a much better understanding. Appreciate those answers. So it is comprehensive. Through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, you're telling us you're going to report back on all of this in Q1 2016. Is that right?
Through the chair, that's the goal.
Okay. I have, over the last term of council, heard, appreciated, I think for the most part, engaged with, even outside of the horseshoe of this committee on several occasions, concerns as it relates to complete streets, much of what we're talking about here, much about with what we're about to engage citywide on. My other colleagues, we've discussed this to a great extent. Those who were here last term probably recall Councillor McCaddy and myself did things like walkabouts on Queen and Cannon, worked hard with lots of folks and got support often on things like the Cannon Street track and other initiatives, even the bus lane, which was at the time a close one, but we implemented it, and most recently on a close one deconstructed it. Regardless, we had our year pilot. And you have to appreciate the debate and in my position understand that it is a vast city with differing opinions, and our colleagues, my colleagues, represent those opinions. And so I believe it was Councillor Whitehead actually working with Councillor McCaddy, if I'm not mistaken, to bring this particular initiative forward, of which I greatly support. And it was the direct result of one of our debates relating to specific Ward 1-2 issues. So I'm glad we're here, but I'm wondering how do you translate the conversation? Number one, I got a two-part question. How do you get as many people as you possibly can out in areas where the conversation really needs to occur? Here, it's a cakewalk. You're opening Monday, March 23rd at the Art Gallery of Hamilton. The joint will be jumping, and I'm sure it'll be as easy as an engagement exercise as you could possibly have. Then it gets more challenging, I suspect, and I'm just wondering how you're going to emphasize and prioritize and work with my colleagues elsewhere as you go about this vast city and engage on this important discussion to get the best bang for your buck. That, I think, is crucial. I think it's important, and I would like to hear what your concept is to that regard.
Through the chair, as I mentioned previously, open invitation today and throughout the study process to each and every one of you of your recommendations. You know best your community. If you think there's an event or an opportunity for us to be there and to engage people, the best way to get people to get involved is to go where people are. When you expect people to attend a meeting, I understand that people have lives. I have a life outside of here, believe it or not. So it's a challenge to get to these meetings, and it's a high expectation to do that. So those are one opportunity to go through events that may be occurring, and we've already reached out to some neighborhood associations and the BIAs to ask what's going on in their neighborhood. It could be a festival, it could be just a neighborhood meeting, lots of opportunities through there. We're also, through Cole Engineering, is going to develop a online tool to do some online engagement, so it's not just your typical public information meetings or just going out to festivals. We want to really show a breadth of opportunities for people to get engaged, and some people may only want to be engaged and be aware of the project, or some people may really want to get into the details and the weeds of the project. So we want to provide different opportunities to for people to get involved through different mediums.
And just on that too, in our program, we've used things in the past, as Steve said, going out to them. We've used things like, developing business cards and leaving them at community centers, going to seniors' home and talking to the people that run there and asking if there's time, making sure that they have something to say. We've sent people out to survey students in the past. So just, because students are sometimes hard to get out to these evening events, going to them and just saying we got surveys that, surveyors that stand around and ask them, what do you think about this, McMaster, Mohawk, et cetera. So we do want to go in and do a robust engagement program.
Through the chair, just one more thing to add. We are working closely with the Vision 2020 team that are doing an update, and I know that they are working with a group that have identified 92 different strategies for engagement. We don't have the budget to do all 92 strategies, but I think a lot of them we can touch on. We might get a vast number of those. So there's lots of different ways to engage people, and we want to maximize that as best as we can.
Great to hear. The online worked with, I believe, when the Queen Street Hill was closed, we devised through Gary Moore a website there and had an opportunity for folks, maybe a little bit different, but to engage with us and talk about their concerns and so forth. Finally, I just, if I can make a quick comment, or are we doing that after?
We can do that after. We have a list of speakers, and we're going to lose quorum if we don't start moving on.
All right, well, I'll tell you what, I'll be very, very briefly just say I very much endorse this, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I hope that my colleagues who have engaged and offered very good discussion on this issue over the first 4 years of my being here do reach out, do offer where those popular festivals and events are so they can set up a few easels and talk to people, because I truly am behind engaging this entire city on this important policy. And thank you for the presentation. I'll receive it at the appropriate time.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Collins.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman, and through you to John or Steve. I reread the executive summary from the 207 recommendations for the Transportation Master Plan. And I'm wondering whether we start with a comprehensive list that talks about what we've completed since that time and what's still outstanding from the original plan.
Through the chair, in the Rapid Ready report, we did have a spreadsheet of all the different projects and what the status of those are. I believe in our request for proposals, we provided a slightly updated version of that. It probably does require a little bit more of an update, but knowing what requisite EAs need to be done for some of the projects were identified, I believe we're 40 or 45% complete that. We're in the detailed design stage, which is another EA process. We're, I think, in the, I won't quote a number, but we're working on it. And then on the ground improvements, you probably have seen very little, but that's not to say that a big chunk of work hasn't been done, because once we identify a project, there's a lot of environmental assessments and specific details that need to be worked out that we won't capture in a transportation master plan. There's too many details. So we identify the projects and then we track the progress. So on the ground work, it may not appear that there's a lot of work done, but all the background done and all the provincial requirements and EA requirements are fulfilled. We're making really good progress on that end of it.
And in terms of the studies that drive the Transportation Master Plan, certainly secondary planning processes will do that. Centennial's on the horizon for this year. How do you incorporate those plans that are running concurrently with what you have here? And I referenced the Centennial Plan because it will run almost along the same timelines that you're completing the Transportation Master Plan update. And you've highlighted appropriately the need focus in on interregional transportation projects like the Centennial GO Station, which I believe was referenced in John's commentary. How do we ensure that when you complete your report, you've captured the recommendations and the priorities that come out of, I'm just using that one as an example, there might be others, but it's the one most important to me. How do we capture those priorities that will come out possibly after you've completed this process?
Through the chair, obviously communication is key. On our project team, we have representatives from Planning and Economic Development, Community Emergency Services, several public works, and public health. We have a real breadth on our project team of around over 20 members of staff are on the team that we check in with because we need a group that big because we're doing a lot of work. Specifically to Centennial, luckily my colleague is about 2 cubicles down from me, so we can have a daily chat about those things. But absolutely, any project that we're doing, we need to have that coordination, because if they're in conflict, then the process is a failure, and we don't want to have that. We want to make sure that our communication is clear, and how can we benefit from each other on the work that we're doing to complement each other in the best way possible.
That's great to hear. And is there a way for us to somehow capture the enthusiasm and the support that we have outside of our boundaries for the GO Station project? And I say that in the context of certainly Grimsby, St. Catharines, Niagara region are strong supporters, or have been at least through the original public consultation processes that we've had. I think that GO Transit held 2 to 3 years ago through their public consultations for GO improvements in the Hamilton, Toronto, Niagara regions. And I know that in the last plan, it was referenced that we need to support these initiatives, and it's kind of awkward because they're not municipal issues. We're not direct funders of it. We may play a role in terms of the design and the planning around the station, but we're not the ones that control whether or not, you know, the tracks are in and the trains are running on the tracks. How do we, from beyond just a pure advocacy role, how do we get more involved with the GO project and surround ourselves with municipalities that have like objectives?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor. I had breakfast with Ronnie Tripp at the Niagara region last week, and their first priority, and they're about to embark on a transportation master plan of their own, is to get GO service to Niagara Falls. It's a huge initiative for them. I think you have a friend in Niagara Falls, in Niagara Falls, to help you with that. I think Burlington as well certainly likes the whole concept of bringing more two-way all-day service, but it goes beyond that to the MTO as well, to some of their highway programs, because there's clearly they've been stalling, and you've got some major issues through your corridors as well that I think a lot of your neighboring municipalities are very concerned with, and are now. I think there are opportunities. I think there are some committees that they've put together to talk about common interests. So again, we could reach out to some of those to get their input as well.
So you're saying we can, we do that? Because if we do the traditional advertising, as you've illustrated here with the 4 PICs, there will be others. We're not going to capture their comments or their support or their advocacy. So is there a way to proactively reach out to them and say, look, we're undertaking the study, GO's an important transportation initiative for us, and we need you to be incorporated into our transportation master plan as a partner?
Through the chair, we maintain in our section a standard stakeholder mailing list. So these stakeholders get mailed directly, and also once we have a refined engagement plan from Cole, there's opportunities to have workshops with neighboring communities, as well as GO or whoever else needs to be at the table to have these discussions of where are you guys going, where are you thinking big, and how are we part of it? Because we're all partners in the regional role of transportation, and Burlington is doing a transportation master plan as much as Hamilton is and Niagara is. So we need to have those conversations to make sure that we're all going in the same direction.
Councillor, we have.
On that, there was a Burlington representative here this morning to see this.
Mr. Burr, would like to say something?
So if I can, through you, Deputy Mayor, just to the councillor's question, the CAO of the region, as well as the head of Public Works, met with Jerry Davis and I the other day here in Hamilton to talk about a variety of things. As you know, there's an alliance that's been formed between Peel, Halton, Waterloo region, Niagara, and ourselves around goods movement. But we have, through the course of those meetings, and as I point out, just recently talked more specifically about in-regional GO transit service. Niagara Falls, and specifically I saw the other day, it passed a motion regarding one of its priorities, and I think it's in the top 3. One of it is GO transit. So to the comments that staff are making here and our consultant, I mean, certainly we will invite them, and in fact, I think I'd be surprised if they didn't participate more directly in this exercise that we're talking about, because it is in their long-term economic interest to see interregional GO extend out to them.
That's great to hear, and anything you can do to facilitate that through the process, I think would help us all. Lastly, I'm fascinated when we undertake master plans that essentially we go out to the public, we have our own internal needs that from a technical perspective we all identify through Mr. Chairman. We'll go out to the public, who will identify areas of concern or interest that they have. And essentially all of those issues are thrown onto a list, and they'll come forward in some form of recommendation that might suggest that we either support at a high level these initiatives. Some of them are problems, others are opportunities, or they are specific recommendations that are just supported, and then they flow through someone's work plan internally. Fascinated by that process because it essentially is, you know, the work is driving the budget rather than the budget driving the work. And if I was to add up the cost of all the initiatives that were part of the 2007 Transportation Master Plan, it would be probably a couple of decades worth of our entire budget process worth of resources. So somehow that all needs to be prioritized. And when I read through the last plan the first time, and then again the executive summary here, I'm not certain we've done a good job in terms of communicating what comes first, second, and so on in terms of short, medium, and long-term priorities, and which ones are actually we're able to support from a budget perspective. Help me with that process through
the chair to the councillor. The whole idea of putting together your needs on the technical and social criteria establishes that priority listing, but then we look at, can you afford it? Where's the funding mechanisms coming from to actually make these things reality? And that's part of this exercise too. It's not just your capital budget, but there may be other sources for some of these things that we examine as part of this whole exercise to say, is this a real program? And if it's not, if it looks beyond, I mean, back in 2007, we didn't really know that 2008 recession was going to hit as well. So, I mean, we got to factor things like that, things we've learned since then to say, don't be overly ambitious. What we've been dealing with in the past may not be what we're dealing with in the future. So we'll be looking at all of those things and trying to make it as real as possible so it is affordable, because there's no point putting together a plan that you can't really implement.
Agreed. So is the plan driving the budget, or is a budget driving the plan?
So through the chair, again, this is a review, and this is a perfect opportunity to identify what works and what doesn't work. And if your direction is to provide us clarity on a decision-making toolbox to help make those decisions, and that's the direction that we can work with. So again, you've identified something that doesn't work. And this is something that we need to look at to see what the opportunities are to help prioritize our transportation system needs, our asset management needs, how do these things marry together, and other needs that are good for the community as a whole. So there's a great balancing act, and I'm listening, I'm hearing that there's a concern about our decision-making process and how do we prioritize these. This is the opportunity to fix that as best as possible by looking at different types of decision-making toolbox or create a made-in-Hamilton solution that provides some clarity on when a project comes up, what takes priority to implement that on a capital basis, as well as identifying any other funding sources that could help implement some plans that we need to go forward. So we know that what we're identifying we can afford, or if we can't afford, then we know that this is a long-range project that has a less priority. So again, this is the opportunity of the review and update to identify what doesn't work for you and what you need from us to integrate into our plans. This is a perfect check-in point before we get too far down the road, and then you have these questions. So that's why we're coming to you today to identify these things that we need to integrate now.
Thank you for that. And if this is a check-in point, my suggestion would be to look at the current capital budget that exists for all of the issues that are related to the Transportation Master Plan from 2007, and look at that as sort of the guideline and the funding envelope that you have on a go-forward basis. What I found in the last plan is that there was not just a list of needs, but a list of wants as well. And when you combine the two lists, they're completely unaffordable. And I bet that if you were to give us the check-in point right now in terms of all the lists that were on the first plan, we'd find that we didn't accomplish some, if not most of those in certain categories because we just don't have the funds. So there's this false expectation from the community when we adopt a plan, people believe that we're going to implement the entire plan. And if we know we don't have the necessary resources, Mr. Chairman, to fund some or all of them on the list, I'm not certain how they make it on the list as priorities. So I would just ask that we be cognizant of that issue and that somehow finance be a part of the master plan's presentation when it comes back, so that when it's presented to council, someone can say with great certainty, this is a plan not only we can support, but we can afford. And I'm not certain we did that the first time around. I blame myself as someone who was here who supported it for not raising it at that time.
Through the chair, just one addition to that. This also presents an opportunity to identify perhaps some corridors that have excess capacity or excess assets that there could be a cost savings if, when the time came to rehabilitate that section of infrastructure, that there's a cost savings by not having to redo all that pavement or curbs. So there's lots of different things that we need to consider that could identify capital costs, but also capital savings opportunities. And so that's something that we're trying to integrate as part of this as well.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. And just to follow on what Councillor Collins was actually talking about, I mean, one of the great debates we're having here is higher order transportation as opposed to more roads and kind of the growth needs of our community going forward. And is your review going to have a hard look at kind of the capital requirements and the differences and where the most cost-effective investments would be in terms of those issues? I mean, it's something that other communities have done in terms of making an assessment as to whether it's in their interest to manage growth through more roads or manage growth through more higher order transportation. I mean, it's not a catch-all, but is that something that you're going to assess?
Through the chair, yes. That was our vision for the last transportation master plan, is to look at optimizing the transportation network and to invest in higher order transit or BRT at that time. So this again is about how can we make the system more efficient, both from an operational perspective of different travel modes as well as efficient through capital funding. So if that's if there's better investment to be had in higher order transit as opposed to road expansion, then obviously that's something that we would have to vet and identify what's the best value for our dollar in terms of investments.
Right. So I mean, it would be clear to me that if you're going to kind of venture into the capital budget kind of assessment and process, that you'd have to, because affordability is an issue, that we'd have to make some choices. So having that information would help us make sensible choices, I would say. Right?
And through the chair to the mayor, part of the exercise that we're going to go through is, you know, the development industry as well. The real estate industry has to be engaged as part of this to make sure, like having growth plans. Even if you invest in transit and hope that the growth is going to be there, the development community's got to realize the marketplace is there for it as well to invest in those and into those growth scenarios. So we will be engaging with them as well to make sure that what we're proposing and what we're hoping for will come to pass.
Okay, thank you. I mean, I think that's a critically important piece. I mean, we talk about kind of the growth plans and reduced dependency on automobiles as part of your kind of key performance indicators, which I think is equally important. So I'm not sure what that means at the end of the day in terms of how you then come forward with a kind of a hierarchy of what is a higher order investment in that sense. But it seems to me that you would have to make a comparison between investment in more roads as opposed to more transit at some point.
Correct, and I think that's associated with the idea of moving people as opposed to moving cars or something else. It's that assessment.
And then when it comes to kind of economic uplift, and you talk about how that then translates into developing community, what part of that are you going to be reflecting in the reporting back at some point in terms of where the growth opportunity is in terms of building community, building more revenue for the city, whether it's commercial, industrial, or even on the residential and the higher density side?
Through the chair, we're working with our planning and economic development partners, and are part of our project team, to identify where those growth areas are. If any more specific data has come in that wasn't available prior to the plan update, to make sure that we're identifying these areas and what specifically that we need to have to address that for those investments as well.
So in your mind, I mean, you would say that transportation in all its forms is integral to kind of the economic well-being of the future of the community, right? So future growth, future economic uplift, future revenues are really tied to our overall transportation decisions going forward. That a reasonable assumption to make?
Through the chair, absolutely, yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, thank you. I mean, so one last question, maybe to our staff, because I recall, and I wasn't here, but or maybe I was, 2007 was the last review, and we're on a 5-year kind of review process, and we're kind of well past that. So is there a reason why we're, not necessarily to you, I guess, but maybe to our staff, why we're 2 or 3 years actually behind the ball here?
So I'll let Steve answer it. I don't know the exact reason why, but we're late. I know that much.
I think the first
I figured that part out, Jerry. Thank you. The question was, why?
Through the chair, it's a 5-year review, but really EAs are valid for 10 years. So we're not necessarily tied to 5 years. We're kind of 7, but we started the process at around 5 to undertake the review. So we developed a scope of work and engaged our city partners on what some of the issues we should include in that scope of work. A lot of things have been happening in the city over the last few years, and a lot of transportation issues have come up. So you don't want to have a scope of work and then something new pops up and you don't consider that. So the timing is actually okay and it works out in our favor. And also Metrolinx is undergoing their update, a big move. So it's actually worked out in our interest, because if we update it and then Metrolinx come up with something else, then we're already behind in our review. So we're trying to work with them in parallel with their process to make sure that what we're saying has an even bigger view of transportation for the region, that we're identifying their trends and where they're going, and make sure that we're walking in the same direction, as opposed to being left behind if they come up with something different than what we're thinking.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I have Councillor Duvall has Councillor Johnson next on his list, and neither are in the council chamber, so I'm going to move on to Councillor Jackson.
Thanks, Mr. Acting Deputy Mayor. Thanks, Steve and John. Could you just go back, starting with slide 7, please? And I just a couple of questions on a few slides here, just so that I have them in front of me, please. Slide 7. Good. Okay. I take it that the different geographic areas of our city will be taken into account. I know that's a broad statement, but Mr. Acting Deputy Mayor, through either Steve or John, please, given the different needs, wants, and just the dynamics of different parts of our city, the one-size-fits-all that a lot of the current movement of what we're seeing differently might be, if you will, more isolated in one part of our city versus other areas. So just for a general comment, maybe John or Steve.
Through the chair to the councillor, we absolutely understand there are differences from area to area in Hamilton. You know, clearly we understand that you were an amalgamation of a number of municipalities at one time. So there clearly are some differences in terms of how they, you know, whether they're more residential based or employment based or goods based, whatever it is, we understand these differences. One of the previous slides that I was just flipping through to see if I can find it, I talked about the, you know, Upper Mountain versus the downtown as a simple comparison of that kind of thing, but there are a number of other different pockets that need to be addressed. And so that's we clearly understand that. One of the first things that we did with staff was take a tour of the city. So we understood all of those issues, and they briefed us on a lot of the concerns and the differences between those areas. So I think that was a great foundation to move forward on that.
Good. Thank you. Things like where there's already through grassroots movements, like in my ward, about 6 years ago, that my East Mountain community led to the permanent ban of heavy trucks on the Kenilworth access that was supported by the Ward 4 councillor in his community when my community brought that forward. Are those type of initiatives, hopefully, if this is all part of complete streets, more modern city in that, and people wanting healthier lives that we discussed hours ago, those type of initiatives are staying in place as part of a truck route consideration, or if any changes are even being contemplated What's already in place will be obviously brought back to the table or with full consultation with the ward councillor of that community. Mr. Acting Deputy Mayor, through you.
Through the chair to councillor, I think the idea is that we would, if our modeling and exercising said we should challenge those kind of decisions, we would go back and actually ask you, is this a must-have or a, I would like to have kind of thing, and so that we could say, are you prepared to allow us to look at those kind of options and bring it back for consultation, say what it would mean, what it would look like, what the corridor would look like again. So all of those things are probably on the table, but they're iterative, and we would respect the decisions of the, the politicians and the stakeholders, but we would at least embrace the options to make sure that we covered off those things that we thought were important to the transportation network. And if they're off the table for some reason, as you said, this is a kickoff point. If those are the kind of things that we need to embrace in our criteria, then we'll embrace them.
So, John, I appreciate that, and I don't mean to be pro-kill in the one I raised, but the one I raised would just absolutely be a non-starter in light of all the developments. And so I guess you mentioned in there your comment in response about being respectful, and I appreciate that because there's just no way this that particular location would just be a non-starter. And I guess I was just looking for that history that would be reviewed and understood and respected. So I'm seeing affirmative nods there, which I'm grateful for. This is mostly, this transportation master plan is about commuter, right? It's not really about recreational. Mr. Acting Deputy Mayor, through to Steve or John. I guess what I'm getting at, Steve, is that for years, I've been a big supporter of recreational pathways and more of them for cycling, walking. And now there's a move on, and has been for a while, for that to come more commonplace on the commuter side. So I just want to be clear. I guess this is more about the commuter angle of the TMP. Through you, Mr. Acting Deputy Mayor.
Through the chair, primarily, yes, that's the answer. However, we do recognize that there are some corridors that may look like a recreational corridor but act as a commuter corridor. So we have to be respectful, again, of how different people move through the city in different ways. But again, in terms of a recreational activity, we're more, you're right, we're more focused about the commuter aspect of things, but we do need to be cognizant that people move in different ways for different purposes. So we need to be respectful of the different purposes the trip can be made in.
Thanks, Steve. On your two, what will include, what will not include, the fourth bullet point, corridor level analysis versus intersection level analysis. So just reconcile that for me. So if I've got currently a no right turn on red at an intersection with some red light cameras, that's the right side of this graphic, that you will not delve into that, but you'll delve more into the corridor of how that corridor functions. Mr. Acting Deputy Mayor, through you for an explanation, please, Steve.
Through the chair, correct. If we looked at every single turn restriction or traffic signal or this, that, the other thing, this very detailed level that we wouldn't give you we wouldn't do the justice of the system. So we're trying to look at corridor, what are opportunities and what are some constraints. If further details may need to be looked at, that's something that we may identify for additional review. However, we wouldn't get at an intersection level analysis.
Okay. If you could quickly turn to slide 10, please, Steve or John. So this is potentially Mammoth. Are you guys going to also talk about cost somewhere along the way? Financial cost, I know some will say on the pro side of this graphic that want this to occur in many parts of our city. They would talk about the cost of not doing it, and that's fine. I just look at the very much upfront cost of what it might mean to the municipality. So, Mr. Deputy Mayor, through you to Steve or John for a comment on that, please.
Through the chair, complete streets look different ways. This is just one example of what one intersection could look like in a complete street scenario, but there's no template for a complete street. There's lots of different options that can be applied at any one given time. Definitely an order of magnitude cost could be provided on treatment, but again, I think that might be getting into more of the details and the intersection level type basis. But if the concept of complete streets and things that we identified in pedestrian mobility plan already have those elements, that we know that there's an order of magnitude cost that's associated with it, recognizing that individual treatments do vary greatly in what can be applied. So there's no cookie cutter complete street. It could look like different ways, and there's maybe different costs associated, but we would definitely look at the order of magnitude costs that could have implications.
Sounded like a good theoretical answer, Steve. So on this graphic, then let me ask you a different way. If this causes a pressure on future budgets to do this kind of complete street policy conversions, considerations, that will be part of the package you bring back, so at least we know what cost there may be, or maybe there won't be any cost to complete street conversions in some cases, or changes to the transportation network, whatever. Mr. Deputy Mayor, through you to John or Steve, please.
Through the chair, back to you. There's good examples of how you've moved forward with some of these already. For example, Burlington Street, where you're putting, rehabbing it, and you're adding some off-road cycling facilities and walkability facilities, and other places where you're doing them on street. So in terms of an order of magnitude, some of them are just simply signs and painting the roadway, existing roadway, and other ones are investing in some capital investments. So at an order of magnitude level, yes, we'll be answering those.
Okay, thank you.
And also through the chair, as mentioned previously, we recognize that we need to identify priorities and what those costs are, and how you make those, and basically to give you better tools to make these decisions. And hopefully, I think that I'm hearing that direction so far is you need better tools to provide your direction to prioritize and make those decisions. So that's something that we're going to take back and look at what opportunities we can to help provide those tools to you.
Thank you. And last slide, 13, please, Steve or John. And last question, Mr. Deputy Mayor. So the bullet point, reduced dependency on automobiles. Fine. Transit rise, one increase per capita, fine. I've got parts of my ward that residents simply want the road upgraded, properly reconstructed. They've waited 40 years. We've had some water main ruptures. You guys have seen or heard these stories often. They just want the back to basics improvements, and if you're going to do more things, they're just saying to me, Tom, just fix what we have so that it's safe, it's usable, and it's up to modern standard. So, Mr. Deputy Mayor, through to Steve and John, with your line about reduced dependency, I hope that potentially doesn't lead to less dollars for some basic upgrades to existing infrastructure that people just want to keep in place what's in place. Please. Through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor.
Through the chair, again, this is just general examples of things, and really reduced dependency on vehicles, really single occupancy vehicles is really what the slide should say. We want, again, maximize the efficiency of the road space that we have. We're not saying eliminate cars or against cars or anything like that. Vehicles are going to be around. We need to have a system that makes those go efficiently, as well as all other modes of transportation. So it's really trying to move people efficiently in the best quality asset and service that we can provide. And if we can maximize that through this plan, again, once the road is redone, it's going to be there for a long time. And we need to think long term and how are we dealing with transportation over the long term instead of a quick fix, and thinking of what potential uses could occur in the future.
Thank you, Steve. And I'm grateful for the community meeting coming up at Emmanuel United Church on Upper Ottawa, with the mountain being the largest population of all the communities within our larger community. It's nice to know we're having two on both Shadow Presbyterian Church and at Emmanuel United Church. So thanks, Steve and John. Thanks, Mr. Deputy Mayor.
Councillor Marilla.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Not to repeat anything that has already said, but must be stressed is the theme of this particular master plan is one that's conducive to reducing dependency on vehicles and increasing walkability as well as cycling, which I think is really the thrust of what the future holds for all transportation plans. So through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, elaborate on that very theory and foundation that this is being built. The importance of that from a sustainability standpoint.
Through the chair, absolutely having a sustainable and efficient transportation system for all road users. We want to encourage modal shift to make those longer vehicle trips more efficient. If we can reduce the shorter distance trips to other modes. Also, we need to be cognizant of what are trending transportation patterns that could occur in the future. I know if you asked me 5 years ago of the concept of autonomous vehicle, I wouldn't know what the heck you're talking about, but that is something that, we have already auto assist reverse parking. Where does that future hold for transportation? And those are things that are cutting edge that not only for vehicles, for other modes of transportation. How are we moving people differently, and how are we maximizing our assets to make sure that the transportation system is efficient?
Excellent, and public transportation plays a role in that as well. And looking at pedestrian fatalities, we're known in the city of Hamilton for being the second worst, I believe, in Ontario. And many of those fatalities, based on my understanding, could be prevented with more of a complete street scenario where speed. Deputy Mayor, with respect to speed and its relevance to fatality, how much of a role does that actually play in being proactive in preventing those fatalities?
Well, I think there's, through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor, there's numerous studies that show that speed is a major factor in going from an injury, a personal injury incident, to a fatality. There's no question about that. And so we will be doing a safety initiative, a policy here to try and look at how, whether we want to reduce speeds. And to be honest, I think you've got one of the more robust red light camera programs as a result of those kind of speed issues, because you have the one-way streets program, which has a tendency to allow people to sort of think that they're going to have a corridor that's a bit of a racetrack for them. So the red light camera program, for example, is the kind of thing that we would be talking about to say you should be embracing that and enhancing that program, assuming it's been successful, and from what I understand it has, to accomplish some of those safety initiatives that you're talking about.
And to correlate or to look at complete streets, so having to ensure that a street is conducive to pedestrians, to public transit, to cycling, to vehicular traffic. When you have a true complete street, it mitigates the speed, which mitigates fatalities, which is in essence what we're striving to do, I presume, through you.
Yes, exactly. What we're trying to do is trying to encourage the whole right-of-way to be used in a more balanced way, if you will, for all users, and that makes them more respectful. Like I said, instead of it looking like a racetrack, it's going to look like somebody lives there. There could be people walking on the streets. There could be cyclists. When you don't expect them, it's an expectancy violation. So this streetscaping that we're talking about creates that expectancy for drivers that they respect the corridor better.
Which, from my perspective, brings me to the conclusion that fatalities, pedestrian fatalities or vehicular fatalities, are probably one of the most preventable deaths. One of the most preventable deaths in the city of Hamilton. You look at any type of death that we're subjected to, whether it be crime or what have you. This probably is one of the most preventable types of deaths that we can pursue. And it's incumbent of us, being that we're second worst in Ontario, to combat it. On that, on the other point, with respect to Kenilworth Avenue, I think Kenilworth Avenue South in Hamilton is probably the first street, major artery, that we've lowered the speed to 40 kilometers, if I'm not mistaken. And now the province, I've noticed, I know that Councillor Collins had Cochrane in that mix as well, and there are a few others, but I think it took a great deal of courage for my community to present that concept, and I will tell you, I took a lot of heat for it, but it's amazing 2 years after the fact how people have bought into it. They have slowed down. They've taken alternative routes. What is your thought, through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, what is your thought on lowering all of the speed limit to 40?
So through the chair, there's 2 exercises that are involved in that. I believe our strategic road safety program is looking at a speed policy. That's certainly something that we need to work with them on, and on some of the details of that. As well, we need to know what the impacts are. So through the modeling exercise, we have the ability to look at the efficiencies of the system if it ran at 40 kilometers an hour versus 50 kilometers an hour, depending on the roadways. But again, understanding the safety concerns and the impacts of collisions with pedestrians, that's something that we would work with the community on, this concept. That's a big change, so we need to do a lot of engagement, not only in the lower city, but also in all the other former municipalities in the mountain, to get the feedback and what people think of that as well. And then you also need to be cognizant of the context-sensitive issues of the 40-kilometer speed limit. Is it applicable in a rural setting versus the urban setting? So there's a lot of things that we need to consider, but understood that that's something that the province is considering, and that's something that we need to consider as part of this process.
And I think it's important to recognize that we were leaders on that particular issue, and I was glad to see that. Evaluating it accordingly province-wide. So I take that as a compliment. But lastly, through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, with respect to our fatality rate, pedestrian fatality rate last year, how many people, are you aware of how many people were actually killed as pedestrians?
Through the chair, I'm not up to date on that specific stat. No.
And that's what I just searched. So through you to Mr. Deputy Mayor, if someone on staff could give us a stat on that.
This time, but we can get back to you with that information.
I guess my point is, if you look at if we had the second worst crime rate or murder rate in Ontario or Canada, there would be a lot of people with up in arms. And the fact that we're second worst fatalities for pedestrian, I expect the public should be up in arms as well. And I look forward to this plan.
Councillor Whitehead for a second time.
Clarification. There are streets like Queen Street Hill, that you dither around down in the lower. We know that employment lands, etc. So you identify what what are the main areas that they're going to, what the hubs are, I guess, however you do your study. But clearly downtown, it's a collection of neighborhoods, but it's also a center of a lot of our doctors, hospitals, clinics. A lot of people from around the city running stores and shops downtown, or lawyers or consultants, financial planners, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So their livelihoods are dependent to some degree on going downtown every day and leaving downtown every day, the lower city every day. So I need to understand from a consultation point of view, when you're looking at making any changes to the road network in the lower city that may impact the quality of life of those individuals, how are you going to ensure those individuals are involved in that input?
Through the chair, again, this study will look at the functionality of certain corridors, whether it's one-way or two-way, looking to see if it can work. A starting point would be our engagement through specific neighborhood groups about issues, through our public information centers, through other avenues, but also it's going to be iterative. So if we identify that this corridor is potential for a two-way conversion, we won't be looking at the detailed design of that. And that's a separate process that's going to require more engagement and more feedback and more input on what that may or may not look, whether we recommend that it should be converted or we recommend that it doesn't be converted. There's always, one way or the other, there's going to be an ongoing engagement process. So this is really a starting point to start that conversation, that we really haven't had a candid citywide conversation about that. And these are things that we're going to be looking at to get their feedback on what their issues are, whether it's strictly safety or there's something about their their livability and their sense of security on the road. So this is the opportunity for the public across the city to identify these issues, and something that we need to take back and part of our evaluation to bring forward back to council.
Yeah, but again, part of it's perception, part of it's reality. So we talked about higher speeds, more fatalities, reality. Quality of life or safer roads, converting one-ways to two-ways, false. Is that correct? Safer streets are one-ways than two-ways.
Through the chair, we have to look at each individual street in each individual circumstance. There's no over-encompassing statement that could apply, because there's so many different factors that could occur in any one corridor. And it's not to say that a better designed one-way street couldn't work versus a two-way street. So there's no one answer. There's lots of different ways we can improve through engineering any design of any street at one time. But again, this is getting into more of the details of what those things could be, but we're looking at functionality and also providing people's feedback and what could be our metrics to decide what these things could be. So, I mean, this is an ongoing conversation. The streets could look like any perfect design and it still not be safe.
So through the chair, what I've been told pretty clearly, from a functionality point of view, by traffic engineers and experts, and statistically speaking, every report I've ever seen, there's more points of conflict, without a doubt, than there is with a one-way. And so you're telling me that you can actually have situations, I mean, how can you badly design a one-way in regards to creating that conflict?
Again, if there's less conflict points, but if there's increased speeds, it doesn't matter if there's double the conflict, that result of that increased speed because of that roadway has an impact. No matter if it's one way or two way, there's always going to be impacts one way or the other. Again, we're providing a decision framework to see what could work or what doesn't work. So there's lots of different things, and safety is one of those aspects that feed into that decision-making process to deal with these requests on a one-by-one basis.
Through the chair, true or false? One-ways are safer. One-ways are safer than two-ways, because I mean, I can bring a litany of a plethora of reports that if you had everything equal, same speed and everything, a two-way and a one-way, that the one-way is going to be a safer route because you have less points of conflict. True or false?
Through the deputy chair to the.
Welcome to Terry Whitehead's game show.
There's a number of criteria that go into that. Decision making. You're quite right. There's fewer access points. The conflicts are worse. The chances that we use a number of criteria, being probability of an incident, the consequence of the incident. And if you've got high speeds on the one-way streets, then if you do have an incident, you could have the consequence could be high. Clearly, the big part is the T-bone crashes at left turns. You've eliminated a lot of those by going one-way streets. So if you're looking at that as being your measure of safety, then yes. You could be having more rear-end accidents, though, because people are stopping unexpectedly on a one-way street. So your measure of decision-making on what is safe and what's not safe that changes the metric a little bit. And so I think that's why we're struggling saying whether it's safe or not safe.
Fair enough. I'll get off that. I'll get off that. But I have met with our traffic people. I have met with our traffic people, and I have looked at studies. So the answers you're giving me now are not consistent with everything I've read. So now I'm going to have to go back to the books and try and determine how your answers are differing from everything I've read in regards to if you construct a good one-way street, it'll be better 10 days to Sunday to a two-way street because of the points of conflict, but that's a different argument. Okay. The question I asked originally, and I don't know if I got an answer on, was, again, when you're consulting on, and back to the functions, employment lands, recreation lands, hospitals, etc., there's a function to the road network that, I mean, you'll have the numbers on how many people commute every day from elsewhere to get to the lower city and back. Those would be pretty significant numbers relative to the people living in the lower city. I'm trying to understand how they are involved in the process and any changes in regards to that transportation network in the lower city.
again, through the chair to the councillor, we do what you were talking about before was nodes, and it's an origin destination sort of matrix that we use, and we rely on surveys that have been done of all these individuals to try and gather an idea of who's traveling in the morning to work, who's traveling during the day to shopping, who's traveling back home at night. Those kind of metrics come out of those surveys, and they're the foundation of our modeling exercise. So we take those and we test them for different scenarios, and then, as you say, we take them back to either BIAs or other groups and say, does this make sense to you in terms of what we're proposing here, in terms of changes to the road network, and it's the same thing with parking policies as well. I mean, those kind of things can change how successful those businesses are as well. You know, and that might say if you can't get cars there, maybe you need to bring a higher order transit in to make sure that that place is successful. It's an as we go kind of thing. I can't really say that we have a specific answer on how they're going to all engage, but certainly the big ones will be engaged. I think the significant ones like hospitals and whatnot will be engaged quite proactively.
I'm just trying to make sure that everyone's involved in any changes that impact on their lives. So, for example, people go to dialysis every day from the mountain to the lower city to the general. So the question is, how are they plugged in to understand the implications of decision making on the road network in the lower city?
So through the chair, if you have suggestions on ways that we can engage differently, again, we want to be where people are. If that means that I need to go to St. Joe's or the McMaster Children's Hospital or wherever to have a display and to engage people, to get them interested in the conversation and how they can get involved in that, then that's something that we can do. If you have other ideas that for us to consider that maybe we didn't consider, please let us know now. I don't want to have these conversations that we didn't engage enough people later in the process. This is the opportunity now to say, Steve, you're not doing enough. You need to go to this place, that place, and we'll make a note of these to make sure that we get as far-reaching as possible, recognizing that short of knocking on every single door in the city may not be feasible, but we want to be in as many places in the city as possible to have this conversation and identify these issues and to identify what concerns are and what role they have in the decision-making process.
Just to wrap it up, regional focus, broader consultation, local focus, local consultation. As long as you live by that mandate, I'm fine with that. So you understand that if you're changing a regional output, that you consult regionally. Thank you.
Okay, John, Steve, I have no further speakers or questions at this point in time. You need a motion to receive the report. Moved by Ferguson, seconded by Pearson. All those in favor? That carries. Thank you. Moving on to discussion items. 8.1 is in front of the committee. Any discussion on 8.1? Councillor Farr.
Congratulate staff, actually, Steve, who was up here before this came along with this TMP presentation. Also, the many neighborhood voices in the North End. This has everything to do with the North End Traffic Management Plan, any TMP implementation update. We heard from a delegation a little bit earlier. Appreciating this report. They come annually, and we, as we see in this report, are into the third year, I guess. It's 2 years now. So outside of the NINA people we heard from this morning, I just wanted to get it on the record that, and certainly some have suggested it's a good thing that I've engaged with North Enders, and I'll tell you, they love to engage with me as well, as you well know, Mr. Deputy Mayor, and on parking petitions, signage issues, where to put speed humps, where not to put speed humps, where not to put chokers, turn restrictions. We had 2 bridge closers, and the neighborhood spoke, and I told them going in I will listen, and I certainly did, and they have helped us amend this plan. As this plan going in on a 5-year pilot for the North End had that written in it. We could, along the way, make adjustments, and we certainly have. I just alluded to some of them, and we thank, outside of the Neighborhood Association, working with class, with staff, those folks who helped us tweak here and there, and will continue to. So going in, said I'd listen. We're listening. To all of the voices in that community, and we maintain the ability to adapt where applicable and finesse these installations as we continue. We're 75% there, but there's much more to come. So Just one example, if I may, with respect to what we've been doing and adapting. One of the engagement exercises not referenced in this report. Staff were kind enough to attend, many of them, a community meeting I held at Bonetto last year, shortly after, or what about a year and a half ago, after we implemented the NETMP. And my invite to all the residents was centered around a theme of how are you adjusting, because it's been a tremendous adjustment. It's not just 30K signs, it's knockdown sticks, it was potentially choker points, it was a lot of why are we doing this, it was how do we get you on James and Burlington, why are you going to close this, why can't we turn right anymore, all kinds of questions that I was hearing day to day. So we said, let's just have a meeting and air it out. Well over 100 vocalized North Enders showed up from all corners of the neighborhood. Some very passionately offered their perspectives and opinions. Myself, my staff, our city staff were very effective in communicating, and not only that, keeping track of some of the comments and concerns that were raised. Steve Malloy particularly, but we had David Ferguson there, Larissa was there, I think Sue Russell and others were there. So what it comes down to for me, or what I've learned from this NETMP, and it is an experiment that I know a lot of different wards are watching, is that not everybody has an intimate knowledge of council's approved plans. In this case, in 2008, when we said go forth and implement the NETMP. And I think you'd probably find that in every neighborhood. Certainly our presenters today from the NENA have done their homework, and we'll credit them for that. But there's a lot of people that live in the neighborhood that just have some obvious questions when change occurs. And in this case, it's been blatantly obvious, this change. So I want to thank all of those folks who engage in the North End, who continue to engage, and who've been working with us, whether they've had petitions on Bay Street or changed the timing on a sign. That's important stuff, and I just wanted to recognize here, Mr. Deputy Mayor, not only the good work of this update, but the good work leading up to the update, and particularly the engagement of the entire North End community as it relates to this North End traffic management plan. That's my 5. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. No other speakers?
I'll move it. Second.
Moved it? Councillor Farr, Councillor Marilla?
No, I'll second.
Okay, Councillor Farr and Councillor Marilla. All those in favor?
Carried.
Any against? 8.2 has been tabled. March the 4th?
Why can't we move that today?
We did. We already moved it in the...
Chairman, 8.2 was tabled under the changes to the agenda so that staff could attend on the 30th.
Sorry.
Yep. Okay. 8.3. Do I have a mover and seconder for 8.3? Councillor Pearson, Councillor Farr, all those in favor?
Carried.
Any against? It's carried. 8.4. Councillor Ferguson.
Just had to make sure you heard me there, Mr. Chairman. First of all, a question to Guy, but first of all, I want to congratulate you on the Airport Employment Growth District. Finally over, 12 years, and I got the email today. I know I spoke to you earlier, and I got an email from Steve yesterday, and so that's been a long time coming. So it's now 100% done, correct?
That's correct, Mr. Chairman. I'm pleased to inform council that it was an unequivocal and unqualified approval and endorsement of council's vision for the
Okay, thank you. Now on to 8.4. We've been waiting a long time for this one. It was budgeted in 2006, and so I'm thrilled to move it. But I just wanted to question the guy. Guy, assuming we don't get a request for bump up, will this finally be extended through to Trinity Road this summer?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, that's what we're endeavoring to do. We've concurrently moved to detailed design and survey and do any land acquisition that's required. So that's the intent. So if all goes well and we do not get a bump up request, which would delay things substantially, we would be in a position to tender this summer.
Thank you. So moved, Mr. Chairman.
And we have a seconder, Councillor Pearson.
She can second.
Any other questions? All those in favor?
Carried.
Any against? Carried. Motions 9.1 we already dealt with. 9.2.
It's before you, Mr. Chairman. It's just asking for staff report. Moved by myself. Second by Councillor Pearson.
All those in favor? Carried. Any against? It's carried. Notices of motion. Councillor Marilla.
Oh, sorry. Moved by myself, the staff be directed to prepare a comprehensive list of the city's outstanding issues, outlining in that report the amount of funding that would be required to achieve what has been legislated by either the federal or provincial government, where there has been little or no funding provided to do so, and report back to the General Issues Committee, and B, that a task force of council be established to seek out a partnership with the federal and provincial governments, possibly through an amendment to the Hamilton Act and or Municipal Act to assist in creating additional revenue streams.
Thank you, Councillor. That's notice of motion. And notices the motion.
I'll second that.
Oh, yeah, North Street.
Okay, we got some other unfinished business to do here. May you please have a motion to approve the proposed new date as shown in item 11.1, St. Mark's feasibility study. Proposed new date is first quarter 2016. Councillor Pearson, Councillor Pursuta, all those in favor?
Carried.
11.2, correspondence from Port Fuels Material Services Incorporated respecting the energy from waste project, Port of Hamilton, dated February 16th. Is there any discussion respecting item 11.2? We have a motion to receive the item 11.2. Councillor Pursuta, Councillor Jackson, all those in favor?
Carried.
Thank you. And private and confidential on 12.2. That report PW 12059D, LS 1202021D, respecting the alley encroachment, 14 James Street North, remain confidential and not be released as a public document. 12.3, Wentworth Lodge Construction, that the update respecting Wentworth Lodge Construction litigation be received. And 12.4, receive the update to the scope of the collective agreements.
Through you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry, I do need a mover and seconder on each of those.
So I need each one? I can't do
Yes.
them all at once?
You can do them all at once, absolutely.
Can I do them all three at the same time? Move all three. Councillor Pearson, Councillor Jackson. All those in favor? Okay, and may I please have a motion to adjourn?
Carried.
Councillor Ferguson, Councillor Pearson. All those in favor? Thank you.
Okay.
Stephanie.
From one frying pan into the fire tonight, Mr. Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, that's tonight, guys. I want to come out, I have library work tonight.
Yeah, that's okay, Maria. Just keep us in your
The library board, that's